Hello. Ooh, we're just doing a little audio check. There we go. Dean, if I get you over here. Hello, can everyone hear that? There we go. Anyone who's watching online, if you struggle with sound, give us a shout. Hello. Hello. Got it. Hi everyone. My name is Mary. Welcome on behalf of Lighthouse Edinburgh's Red Bookshop. It is such a joy and a treat to be hosting this particular event in this particular moment in time, so thank you for coming to join us for it. We have the space for a good stretch of time. We've got an hour for the event, and then we've got a little bit of time afterwards. So there will be a signing in the lobby back through there, and you can stick around in the cafe area and meet and chat and make connections. And there will also be a little moment after the Q&A while I extract these beautiful people for the signing table, when we're going to do some shout outs to some community organizing and bits and pieces that people can get involved in. So if there's something you're working with or in that you want people to join, then give us a chance to shout about that. And now over to the wonderful Nat Raha. Will you put your hands together to welcome our panel?
Hey everyone, thanks for coming out. It's Wednesday, 1st of October. If you don't know me, I'm Nat Raha. I'm a poet. I'm also co-author of this book on the table, Transfem Futures, Abolitionist Ethics for Transfeminist Worlds. I was like, everyone's sick of me. You've seen me too many times in the past year. But tonight, it's my delight to welcome two friends back to Edinburgh, Tsang and Dean Spade, on the occasion, I don't want to just say celebrate, to talk about, to get into the meat of this book and the work around it that you've both been up to, Love in a Fucked Up World, How to Build Relationships, Hook Up, and Raise Hell Together. Haha. I'm just going to say a few words about our speakers who we're here with tonight. So, Dean Spade is an activist, lawyer, scholar. He's the author of Normal Life, which administrative violence, critical trans-politics, and the limits of law, which I can't really explain how fundamental this book was for many of us working in trans and queer movements, like 2013 came out maybe? 2012, 2011, 2011. And this book, and also the film you made, Impossibility Now, around that time, really were kind of these key, both primers, but points of entry to really think about, for, you know, the kind of thinking I've been involved in as well, about the problems of our desires for the state to give us rights and to save us, especially around trans people, and like the whole question of the prison industrial complex in relation to trans and queer life. Dean also is the author of Mutual Aid, this handbook, Building Solidarity During the Crisis, which came out around the time of COVID-19. I'm sure those people have read it here. And yeah, and this new book, Dean's also got a podcast also called Love in a Fucked Up World, which if you're more into listening, is also a great source. And I feel like Dean's been in my ears as well, talking about this book and these ideas. So thank you so much for being here. Tsang is an artist and does many other things too, and is going to tell us a bit about some of them tonight. Wu is part of a performance collective that's been running for about 13 years called Moved by the Motion with Tash Brasco. Wu's currently the artist in residence at the Schurspiel House, or the Playhouse in Zurich, and has recently curated a show called Theatre Picasso, which is another Tate Modern at the moment, right? And Wu and Dean have also been collaborating, so they're going to tell us a bit about that as we go. Cool. I'm going to hand it to you, Dean, because Dean's going to start by reading, and we're going to ask some questions. I'm going to ask some questions. We're going to have a bit of a chat, and we'll also have plenty of time for Q&A. The clock at the back of the room is broken, so I'll keep an eye on that. And we have kind of roughly an hour, kind of maybe more, depending on how we're feeling. So have a think about I'm sure plenty of people who've read the book already have got plenty of questions, so have a think about that and I'll come to you. And yeah, hi.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nat, for being part of this, and Woo, and thank you to Lighthouse for organizing. Thank you all for coming. It's such a big deal to get to do in-person events. I just long for it. Thank you all for wearing masks, and to Lighthouse for being, I think, the only venue that I'm working with in the UK that already has people wearing masks. It's just such a big deal during this level of illness and denial that we're living in. Yeah, I thought I would just start by reading a little bit from the conclusion to set the tone. And yeah, then we can dive into conversation. Okay. I haven't done a book event in a while. This is fun. I spend all my time doing events, facilitating conflicts between organizers.
It's like first night of the UK tour.
Less celebratory, yeah. Okay. Many of us turn towards self-help books with hopes of instantaneous change. Capitalism sells promises of total health, wealth, and blissful happiness. But in reality, being alive is a wild, constantly changing mix of beauty, suffering, agony, contentment, and dissatisfaction. No matter how we fight it, everything around us is impermanent. Even everything we want and love will come to an end, just as our lives will. We have to approach both our relationships with other people and our own healing with a humble outlook and reasonable expectations. One question often guides me when I'm stuck. What am I so afraid of being seen doing that I'm willing to limit my steps toward what I want in life? If you use the methods outlined in this book, you might experience more emotional awareness. You might begin to notice the moments when you are gripped by autopilot reactions. You might hear cultural scripts like the romance myth or scarcity thinking running through your mind and find ways to resist their pull. You might be able to think, that's not me, that's not mine. You might notice when you're reacting in ways that are out of proportion to the situation. Perhaps you might connect this reaction to a fear of abandonment or engulfment and recover before you say or do something hurtful to someone you love. Or you might say those hurtful things, but be better able to apologize. You might gossip less. You might find your conflicts bring you closer to others rather than damaging your relationships with them. You might become better able to say yes, no, and maybe to other people. You might find that autopilot reactions still arise in you, but they don't determine your behavior and you recover more quickly. You might not feel as much shame about them. You might find that people or situations that used to really get under your skin just don't get you so worked up anymore. It has helped me to return to a phrase I use throughout this book, which I think is a 12-step slogan, but it might not be. Healing is a spiral staircase. I think about myself walking a circle like a clock. As I heal, I will re-encounter again and again the wounds that have shaped my life and the coping mechanisms that I developed to get through rough times. Each time I re-encounter them, rather than being ashamed to still be affected or disappointed that I'm not fixed yet, I try to cultivate acceptance. This is the hand I was dealt, and everything in my life, all that is beautiful and all that is rough, all that is shared and all that is lonely, stems from this same hand. My task is to cultivate discernment and clarity about these conditions so that I can act with compassion and intention, rather than being blown around by cultural forces that try to shape me in a past I can't change. Life is not going to get easier in the years to come. The crises we are facing are real and worsening. Most of us are in some denial about this because it's overwhelming, hard to comprehend. Reports of global heating, mass extinctions, sea level rise, extreme weather, failing crops, ocean acidification, zoonotic diseases, deforestation, and melting ice sheets have become more dire than scientists had predicted even just a few years ago. The industrial consumer society that created this crisis has already caused such irreversible damage to the planet that our lives will certainly be irrevocably altered. Many people are already acutely affected. Even if all governments in the world stop pandering to the interests of the ultra-wealthy, and even if all industries immediately stop polluting, neither of which is likely to happen, the damage already inflicted is irreversibly changing the planet. We can and should try to reduce any harm that we possibly can, but we also have to face the reality that our lives are about to get much harder, Contemporary human society is dependent on extractive systems for survival. The way we eat, travel, get healthcare, and communicate all pollute and extract. And the COVID pandemic revealed the fragility of the supply chains that keep this situation afloat. It's all so bad, and it's about to get so much worse. And even as this previously preventable collapse unfolds, we have been misled about how dire things are. We've been led to believe that governments and experts will fix this. The catastrophic impacts are multiplying, yet we are fed feel-good stories about renewables and urged to funnel our profound fears and desires for collective action into individual consumer choices, social media posts, voting, and donating to nonprofits whose efforts at policy reform only tinker with the overarching systems causing the crisis. This is the reality of our situation, and in the times to come, we're going to need each other more than ever. As I work to let this incomprehensible and heartbreaking truth into my life, I'm filled with anger and grief. But hand in hand with that grief is an even deeper appreciation for the beauty of the living planet and the bold resistance and care that people demonstrate every day in the face of these conditions. I'm inspired to further divest from the systems of greed that have created this mess, and to shake off all the bad ideas and habits they have implanted in my psyche. I ask myself, how do I want to be in these times? Again and again, the answer I come to is that I want to face up to these tragedies with an open and loving heart. I want to be part of collective efforts to care for others and stop as much destruction as possible. I want to appreciate every remaining moment of my life, even knowing that much is out of my control. I want to live according to my principles and priorities, not wasting time on nonsense I've been told is important. I want to be deeply connected to the people I love. I want to find more ways to care for strangers and create survival strategies that are collective and inclusive, not distrustful or insular. In the times to come, we're going to have to find ways to be with one another under enormous stress and in devastating grief. I mean, it's already that way, but even more, I think. We will be called on to demonstrate capacities that are devalued and underdeveloped in dominant society: generosity, courage, connection, compassion, and imagination. I want us to be as awake to what is happening as possible, as capable as we can be to respond in ways that align with collective liberation. I want us to be able to relate to others with as much integrity as we can, responding to immediate conditions rather than being stuck in old cultural scripts or coping mechanisms that undermine effective action. The romance myth is a lie. There's no happily ever after. There never was. Instead, there is the possibility of being here for what's here, of treating others and ourselves as well as we can, of experiencing the thrills available in intimacy, collaboration, collective resistance, and belonging. Let's be here for what's here together in this gorgeous, fucked up world.
Thanks so much for that reading, Dean. My kind of opening question is if you could speak about the impetus for writing this book now. I think you've just obviously described this moment that we're in politically, culturally, in terms of like where extractive racial capitalism has led us and all of the things that all the people that we hate are trying to maintain and reproduce right now. But I'm also interested in how it emerges as a book, as like a workbook that's about love and relationships and interpersonal relationships, movement relationships, our friendships, and what's been the impetus for you to produce this? And I was thinking at first, I was like, oh, this book's so, I was like, this is not what I expected you to do in 2025, Dean, I'm not gonna lie. But then when I was looking back at Mutual Aid, I was like, actually, Mutual Aid's also kind of a workbook, it's obviously much more movement oriented. And I was thinking about this, how it's connected to your work as a lawyer, as an activist lawyer, working for Sylvia Rivera Law Project for many years in the 2000s as well, right? And yeah, if you could tell us a bit about this, about why now?
Yeah, why did I write a self-help book? It's so embarrassing. Very cringy. Well, it took me 10 years to write this book because I had so many, I had this, like, is this okay to write kind of feeling. And because everything that's in here is actually pretty, complicated. Why did I write this? you know, I've spent all these years that I've been doing all the movement work that maybe more people know about if you're in the same movements as me. Also just trying to figure out like how to show up for these movements and spending almost all of my time working with all the constant conflict that is happening in all of our movement groups and other things, just like how to welcome new people, how to help people who believe in something try doing something about it with others, like all the major barriers to that are really real. And doing a lot of work on myself, and like if you do this work with others, you find out about your shadow side a lot, you know, and about the shadow side that's implanted in you by a society that organizes us for destruction instead of for connection and well-being. So I think this book is a few things, like there's a hope. I also found myself a lot. I read self-help like wildly and have used every healing tool, so it's rough in here. And most of it is really fucked up, and you can't hand it to other radicals. It's like it's sexist and racist and ableist, like so ableist, and like, you know, it imagines the good life is like getting married and owning a house and shit. And so part of it, I wanted to just take some of the ideas that are really useful, because the useful thing is it identifies patterns of behavior that are shared among a lot of people, and then if you spot the pattern, you might get more choice about whether to keep doing it. I wanted to reread it in a way that I already do in my mind when I read it, through like feminist, anti-racist, anti-colonial lens, etc., anti-capitalist lens, disability justice lens. So I wanted that to have that to be able to hand people, because oftentimes I can't give you the book, but here's the skinny, and this is what I think might be helpful with the conflict you're experiencing or the suffering you're experiencing. And then why love? Why did I make it around? I mean, actually, originally the book was much, much longer, and there was about work and other things. I had to split it into multiple books. So the next one's called Getting Shit Done in a Fucked Up World, and it's about the work collaboration stuff. But I put up the romance sex one first because, like, obviously, like people hate doing this work, right? And so you gotta go to the sex one. And also the act are very important. You know, we really, most of our groups are really torn apart by things that happen. Not exclusively, I think you can read this entire book just about friendship or just about collaboration, but like, most of us, our lives have been fucked up by our own or somebody else's unethical, romantic, sexual relationship experiences, you know? And so it feels like it's an anti-violence tool. It's like really about, like, I'm hoping that if we use these tools together and have some shorthand together about these patterns, we might prevent some of this conflict. But why, and people keep asking me that, you know, especially because it came out right after like the election of Donald Trump or whatever, it's just a coincidence. Like, I've been working on this thing forever. Kind of slow down. And
sorry, excuse me.
I'm too.
Choke you on stage.
Excuse me. This is the second time that's happened recently. It's also interesting because I think also in reading the conclusion and in immediately diving into a kind of movement context, we've kind of jumped, I was thinking about this as maybe like, it's like a bridge between doing the work, as in like therapy, right? The work, that's what I'm going to call the work. And the way that being in social movements really makes us feel wild and exhilarated and can be also really challenging, right? And next to that is, the book's also is for a general reader, right? It's not necessarily written, the reader is not necessarily somebody who is in self-organized or radical communities or is queer or is LGBTQ. Although obviously it's written with us in mind because, as you just said, so many of the other books are heteronormative, ableist, racist, etc. And in this kind of like general sense, there's the sense of like, our technical term is like prefigurative politics, but like what the abolitionist vision of like how we living in the way that we want to live in the world, or practicing the ethics or the politics or treating each other in a way that we want to try and practice in a world without prisons, in a world without police, in a world without borders, in a world without management. But it's really actually about like, so much of this is about how we look out for ourselves, how we care for how we treat ourselves, and how we treat each other. Which I think is the core that you've kind of distilled really beautifully here. So I was wondering if you could speak about this a little bit in relation to these questions around like prefigurative politics, and then we're going to bring you in a minute about the work you've been doing with this as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the first questions that a journalist asked me about this book, which really helped me learn what the book was about, you know, that exists. That's something we all encounter in our movements and stuff. And I realized that the book isn't about labels you put on others.
Yeah.
There's nothing inside my psyche that says toxic masculinity. I might be doing it, but it's actually called fear of abandonment or fear of engulfment or insecurity. It's not right. This book is for the looking inward. And so when we tell somebody, sometimes it can be really useful to use a term like that, to be like, you're doing this thing in the group or in this relationship. But then that person has to figure out what's really going on with them to stop doing it. This book is about that stage. And I think I've been in movements forever where we're really good at labeling other people's behavior and pathologizing people, but figuring out how to stop doing stuff. And like, we can't kick out, the whole point of abolition is we can't kick everybody out of the community who makes mistakes or does stuff that's culturally determined, because it would be everybody, right? And so, how do we take that step of becoming the people who could be in the movements, who could be in the freer world we're trying to build? And these are those words for me. Like, what happens when I feel really strongly about the group or about another person in the group or about my date or my roommate? What happens when I'm around somebody who's feeling really strongly? Like, what can we do with those moments? And labeling them is insufficient. Like, we need, like, a set of relational skills. And I think in some ways that's why this book for me is an abolitionist tool and a tool about prefigurative politics. It's like, I want to act like this. How do I get from here to there? It really tries to be very gentle. It's interesting, I wanted to write it for a general enough readership, like people who were beginning to wake up from 2020, from, genocide in Gaza, from, things that are happening in their own life. Like, a lot of people wake up to, like, the contact in their own relationships, so I wanted it to be there, where people wake up and are like, what's wrong? And then I wanted to fill it with stories of people who are in movements, so you'd be like, how does that work? What does it mean? Like, why are people being up? There's an unrated group, what's that, Why would people hate marriage? What's that? Like, put that stuff in here, but super simple. And then I've had people say to me, wow, can I just give this to, like, all the straight moms at my kids' school? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. The more the merrier. Yeah, like, that person might not find it, unless somebody gives it to her, but, like, yeah.
And there's also the sense of, like, it's probably a good time to be a radical, somebody engaged in abolitionist questions in a self-help space, right? There's also quite a lot of this thinking as we've been moving into the self-help sphere. I'm thinking of, like, Edinburgh is like a powerhouse at this point in terms of like publishing and editing, having books that are also just really useful tools that come from our world maybe, that are going back into a space that isn't necessarily so attached to the kinds of political and queer worlds that we're in. And so I was really excited to hear that you guys have also made a play, right? For kids. We were doing a big collaborating. They made a play called Robin Hood. Do you want to tell us about the play? Because I think this is actually really key. It's like, how do we get these, if we're trying to break down these cultural norms, these stereotypes, and in a way that is really about us recognizing our own behavior, us really doing this fundamentally inward-looking work, and also simultaneously trying to hold our community relations, our friendships with generosity and compassion, then starting young is going to save a lot of people a lot of work. Tell us what you've been up to.
Hello, thank you. Well, I will talk about Robin Hood. Maybe I could also just say, yeah, Dean is an old friend of, I guess, like 20 years, and actually a lot of the big projects that I've done over the span of my artistic career have in one way or another been extremely inspired by Dean's work. My first feature film, Wildness, was very much inspired by normal life, and Dean was like a conversant with me throughout the whole process of making this documentary, and also Mutual Aid was a big inspiration for another children's play that we made in Zurich called Pinocchio. And then most recently, we were working on a children's play, Robin Hood. Actually, Sophia Almeria, who's the writer, and I were really engaged thinking through, first of all, the kids' plays we discovered are our absolute favorite art form of creation. Just because it's like really magical to get the feedback of the audience.
I wish you were writing plays when I was a kid.
I just feel still like, maybe I hope I will be able to look back one day and say it's my calling because
we can see the
yeah.
kid inside us.
But yeah, I think like amongst other things, when we have done kids plays now too, both times we were really thinking like how to disrupt the archetypes of like the hero, so it's not just like one person that like is important and everybody else is like following. And in the case of Robin Hood, we thought, okay, great, what if, you know, Robin Hood's like the figurehead of a movement, and actually like there's this kind of research around the myth of Robin Hood because it's such a like oral history, you know, it has all these like radical origins, and there was this band of like bandits that were the foresters, so we thought, okay, there's this like band of people, and Robin Hood's just like, he's like the famous one, but actually there's all these radical people doing collective work like in the forest. And this is also like another thing where Mutual Aid was like inspiring us, is just thinking about wildness and like the wild and like places of like sort of like where you invent your sociality together, you co-create it. And so like we brought those themes in, and actually right when we were beginning to write, Dean's book came out, and then we were like, this is like a whole nother level, because actually we could really bring the idea of conflict and like within a group, because that's the problem I think, especially in kids' stories, we always get pulled towards like fantasy and like everything works out, and we were like, no, actually a more interesting story that actually I think kids really can relate to is like not everybody gets along, or like there's, in our case, the sheriff of Nottingham is like the bully and he's abusing and aggressing people, but actually he's still a being in this world, and like it's not about labeling him, or it's not simply about labeling and naming the violence, but it's also about what happens after that moment. Like how do you rehabilitate, or how do you like evolve? And so that's kind of where our story tried to go. And there's literally like text from this book, like the animals say, because we did it as animals, so which is the other fun thing about kids plays, you know. But so yeah, I mean that's exciting to me that like we can introduce these themes through like puppets and music and dancing and like costuming, and they're actually there even is a line in the play where they say like, you know, being alive is wild or something. Like I just forgot that when you read it, I was like, yeah, that's a line in the play. Or like I love this line, belonging takes practice too, because that was something that felt like really like an aha moment for me when I think about collective work and like really working in groups, because actually that's something else I've discovered over time, is that like making theater is so much about collective work. Like it's like a structure, or filmmaking, these are like, you know, in art there are these structures to work together, and all the same conflicts play out, like all the same interpersonal dramas, and I think actually that like naming certain things that we don't think of as like also conditions of struggle is like, it's as hard to include people when there's not everyone's feeling, you know, like the same, as it is for the person when everyone's like, you're welcome, and that person's like, I can't, you know, it's just like there's so many things that get activated for us. And I just think that's like one of the things that really inspires me about this book, is it's really like so many people I know on so many different fields, like creative, activists, artists, like any kind of thing, no matter like how smart and evolved we are with our politics or our beliefs, something about romance and intimacy, it's almost like we forget, like everything shuts, the curtain falls, and then we are just like our childhood selves that are like triggered by family stuff and triggered by whatever. So I think it's really for everyone. I've given it to a lot of moms.
Well, for the moms, maybe we should chat a bit about the romance myth, although I'm like, yeah, Dee, tell us about the centrality of this in terms of what it has in our lives, on all of us, you know, not just all of us who, you know, I mean, like, against romance the whole time, but romance myth still in there, still a problem. And some of the challenges that some of the challenges and the kind of toxic behaviour and treatment of our partners and friends that the romance myth may provoke.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I learned with romance myths from like 70s feminists, but then like it was just like not talked about for like decades. And then there was a horrible, hideous like gay marriage movement that really re-romanticized everybody, and it was like marriage is about dignity and love is love and all that shit. And actually, you know, marriage is about state control and taxation and military conscription and exactly, and colonialism. But yeah, the romance myth is like this, you know, ubiquitous message in every song and TV show and book, and that you that this kind of relationship is the place to get love and security, which is a really big deal because we're really scared living in a system like this where literally people can be put in cages or starved to death on the street. It makes sense that we seek security and we really want it, and we're very isolated. We were talking about beforehand, and it tells us that you should give up everything for this, and that you should ditch your friends for it. That friendship isn't important. What's important is romantic partners or families that are created out of romantic partnerships, and that you kind of have this brief period in your adolescence where you have friends in between having your blood family and your new family you create, and like that's just like a light thing that doesn't matter, which is part of why I think friendship is such a radical space, is because it's actually not as fully colonized, although obviously social media is doing all of that.
And can I jump in and just be like, it's not just about us knowing this. It's about we can know this until the cows come home, but we might still practice it in how we treat each other, right?
Yeah, and some of the ways that looks is, that we think others can read our minds, or we think we can read others' minds. We think what I think is normal in romance, you have to think too. So we blame each other. There's a lot of resentment, like most long-term relationships are filled with resentment that are in part about these expectations. I thought I could feel this level of safety or seen or beloved or hot or whatever, and like one person can't do that for you. People just end up in these very isolated units, and also people are told that their life is meaningless. Like some people I know who are my age and don't have a partner are like think they're alone, and I'm like, what about me? I'm your friend. Like you're not alone. Like all your other things is a very like intense, sad lie we tell ourselves about what matters. And I think it undergirds rape culture and domestic violence and so many other being very old and not having anyone around you, and all those like things that are intense. And one of the things that relates to what Wu was just saying, they talked about in the book, is like there's a romance cycle where like I meet you and I'm like, oh my god, the sunshine is here and this person really gets me and I'm the only one and we should run away together and whatever. And then at some point, often when I feel I've landed you, whatever that means for me, I expect to get all the needs met and feel the love I didn't feel as a child. And at some point, I will experience great disappointment. And then what we do after that, like, do we like get stuck in like protracted conflict and like stay together for 20 years, being super mean to each other, or do we break up, or do we cheat, or do we lie, or like all of them, do we tell the whole community to hate the other one? All of that stuff comes from. But this cycle is the same cycle that happens when we join movement groups, artistic collaborations, new households with great new roommates you're excited about. Like, and if we just knew it was actually normal, like, can we know it's a cycle? Like, the point of the book isn't to stop having some of those feelings. Like, I am like a fool for love like everyone else. It's to be like, oh, woo, I just started having sex with this hot guy. Will you please remind me not to buy any property with him, not to move anywhere with him? Like, or whatever. Or I just found this incredible group. These people really know what Mutual Aid is. They are giving away hormones to other trans people, and they have figured it all out, and they're so nice to each other. Will you just be like, later when I'm disappointed by them, will you tell me, like, maybe don't post about them online, Dean? I think they're actually still our people, even if they disappointed you. Yeah, maybe talk to them directly or whatever. Like, can we help each other through these very common experiences? Can we help new people who are having their first romance with a group or a person or whatever? Can we help them, hold them through it and help them not make unethical choices about it, even though it's really a lot. The winds blow hard inside these experiences, and it's like the belonging stuff, like, oh my god, it's happening again, I don't belong anywhere, this is just like my family or just like my school where I was the only one. Like, we really bring a lot of baggage and a lot of lenses to group experiences, and right now in our movements, all of our groups just blow up one after. I mean, how many projects have I been part of that were vitally needed for our communities that ended because we can't hold people having those really strong experiences, and when we're the activated person, we're like out for blood. So a lot of this book is just about, can I, while I'm having a really strong experience, be like, wow, I'm having a really strong experience. A millimeter of space there, not like I have to not have it. I'm having it, it's okay to have it, and I'm not going to take action on it right now, and then get support. That's the only way.
In there's already something about this question around kind of community accountability, is maybe like the term, but it's actually a much more everyday thing of being like, how do we have feelings in the context of a world that has people, that has community, and maybe that's an interesting question as you're talking and thinking about like, oh, what would it mean if like there's an activist group that does something or does a certain kind of mutual aid provision, and then like there's a conflict in the group that's between the people, but the people that the group is working with are actually the people who are affected by the group not functioning, right? And what might it mean to have some kind of like some process of holding that, or trying to be in dialogue in a way that it's like, hey, we gotta work this out, because the people who use our service or who are there, not even use our service, right? That's essentially a model. But the people who we're working with, the people who are our participants, our community, that they need us. We need to try and figure this, and it's so much easier said than done. But maybe you're giving us some tools in terms of like key concepts and things to be working through. And maybe I'm like, as you're talking, obviously thinking about theatre or cinema as this collective rehearsal. Obviously, it's not just rehearsal; it's also making things. That collective artistic practices, collective creative practices are part of this rehearsal for the world that we want. But I'm kind of intrigued, being like, when you're like, oh, the characters are all animals. Is there a particular moment or a particular like moment in the play where there's like a character who's really fronting one of the key concepts that he's giving us in this book that you maybe want to share?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a spoiler, but in our adaptation of Robin Hood, because, you know, for those of you that know the story, the Sheriff of Nottingham is like a really evil character, because he's kind of like, he's taxing the poor and he's throwing people in jail. You know, he just represents like the arm of the state, basically. And so in our version, like, there is a point at which we discover that he also is like, because we're all animal characters, he's a German Shepherd. Of course, he's a cop. And he has a master. Dogs too. So he has a master. There's like an unembodied human that comes from above, like a voice of the man, basically. And we realize that he too is actually caught in a system of like trying to like win approval, or like, you know, be a good boy. This is his whole thing, is like, I'm a good dog, you know. He has this like fucked up idea of what it means to be good, you know. So that's kind of his journey. But actually he gets fired, or he gets like kicked out, and he has to go fend for himself in the woods. And that's actually when he discovers like the band Merriman. And there's a whole discussion, like, because some people are like, no, like, once a cop, always a cop, you know, like, this person is not, like, he's not one of us, he can never be one of us. And so there's a whole, like, discussion, because, yeah, I think that was an interesting thing, because we had, like, test audiences when we were working on the play, and the kids would also be, like, split in opinion, you know, like, they'd be like, some would be like, no, I think we should let him stay, and some would be like, no, he's, but I don't know, I remember Dean, like, because we've talked about the storyline a bit, and you observed that there, like, I remember you mentioned something about, like soldiers who come home from war and, like, have these, like, it's just kind of like a storyline that maybe we're trying to make relatable, because it's not just about, like, that those of us that have the right politics or are good are just, like, inherently inheriting, like, a better life or something, and, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really juicy, right? Because obviously one of the forms of discernment that as abolitionists we have is like, while you're working as a cop, we're not looking to dialogue with you. So it's really important that in this play, the Sheriff of Nottingham stops being a cop and then seeks to live with the foresters. To me, that's really meaningful, and that is like people who have worked for the war machine, right? And actually recently posted something on Instagram about these outrageous numbers of suicide of U.S. vets. You know, there's so much suicide, and there's so much sexual violence in the U.S. military. It's just like so much racism. And somebody wrote to me and was like, you know, fuck you for posting that. They're all class trailers, blah blah blah. And I was like, I don't care if they see it that way. Fine, you know. Everyone doesn't need to see everything the same way or work on the same things. That's not their thing to work on. That's fine. But I feel like it's actually really an important example, and that means that, like, if we're working on a mutual aid project together, and I'm really upset with you, could I remember the purpose of our project, like you were just saying? Like, part of what happens when we get overwhelmed, you know, so then, or I can be like, you hurt me, and now my main purpose is making sure everyone in our community excludes you. And it could be that it could be that you need feedback. And a lot of my work is about people getting feedback sooner, instead of blowing up and leaving and trying to campaign against other people in our communities. Like, so much of it is like, I didn't tell you what I thought for 3 months or for 3 years, and then I'm so mad at you. You know, but this question that's in the play, like, do I need to be like, Nat's a bad type of person, period, everyone get rid of her? Or can I be like, Nat's a person like me, like all of us, who needs feedback, who's working on living our values, and I might need help remembering that when I've really been hurt by someone, and I might not be the person who needs to work with Nat. There's lots of creative ways our communities have that are all imperfect, but are all better than the not. I get it, like, a very common question I get at events is, hey, we tried transformative justice in our community, it doesn't work. And what I hear there is like, yeah, we weren't able to make harm and violence never have happened. We weren't able to, you know, like, we weren't able to meet all the needs of all people in crisis in this situation. To me, it's a success if nobody went to jail or prison and there was support for survivors at all, because in our system, there's none. Like, we have to, it's really sad, but it's like lower the bar of our expectations and then really try to support each other. And part of the reason it like doesn't work or why it's hard is because not enough people are involved in it. If there's 4 of us supporting a person in crisis who's hurting people, who's struggling with their housing, who's struggling with their immigration status or their addiction, or like, yeah, we're not gonna succeed in like resolving all that, you know, so where am I going with this? But I think that this fundamental question of like really letting go of the idea that there are bad people. Like really letting go, and like, yeah, no good cops. Like, while you're doing certain jobs, we are not dialoguing our way out of this. That's like the sneaky thing of the stage. But like every person is inherently made for belonging and connection and healing. And like we're trying to make movements that invite as many people as possible to become involved in that and to recruit to that. And that includes dealing with how hard we all are.
I'm going to open up in a second, so please get your question. I was kind of like, one of the things that was really moving in the book is actually some of the examples and the stories that you give. One of them was one that you tell about your own experience around a boyfriend who just got sober, and you were in this process of saying, like, after the boyfriend's got sober, you're like, wow, I remembered all the things that you did when you were drunk that really upset me. And having a dialogue that on one hand is like long term, you know, you're talking like this is like years, the relationship is going over years. And simultaneously in that it's like a long-term project of compassion and sharing and honesty, being like, actually I am really upset with you, and the more honest you can be about it over time, the easier it becomes. And I think so in there there's also this question about like, what does it mean to practice? And it really, you know, I spend all my time thinking about practices, not too much with futures. But what does it really mean to practice these forms of like, we don't have to call it radical honesty, it's even just like being open in a way that might not be easy for us because we might have been told our feelings don't matter, so we've learned not to express our feelings. And I'm kind of also, I'm like, because one of the things I imagine in reading the book is that like, you've had hundreds of conversations over the last 25 years with people, both like friends, people you've been working with, like clients in the movement, like your legal practice, close collaborations with long-term friends, and in all of this, this is the fabric of life, right? And we're all messy, like we all come from different places. We all got our traumas, right? We've all got our fears, we've all got our felt sense of needs, but we're so attuned to them being up close and everything feeling like it's here and not, we really struggle to get distance from that. And maybe isn't a question, but I was like, is there a particular moment, a particular story where you're like, oh yeah, okay, this is the thing that reveals something about how we can try and be together in a different way.
Yeah, that idea of practice, I studied with generative somatics for many years, and they have this phrase, You are what you practice, and you're always practicing something. And that idea is so helpful. And so what am I practicing? You know, what am I practicing about feedback? What do I tell myself when I'm deciding not to give feedback to my roommate or friend or the other person I work with on something? Like, that has been a really helpful thing for me. Just like, what do I think? Well, she's not that important to me, or she won't take it well, or, you know, like, how are we all conspiring to not give feedback? And what would it be like to change practice? One thing I've been working with groups on doing is creating a litany at the beginning and end of meetings. That's just like, at these, we reminding each other that we believe in like making mistakes in public, and that we believe in direct feedback and repair and apology, and we all try to be non-defensive, and we know that no one here is perfect, and we're imperfect people doing imperfect work, and like just saying stuff like that, like you know that way like churches and 12-step meetings and stuff, just say the same things over and over again. It's really helpful, right? So just like saying some of those principles, because it's totally countercultural. People are raised to talk behind your back and not tell you your face and disappear and wanting to be perfect. And we're all so, especially everyone who I'm sure is in this room, like we want to be good so badly. And so we're very defensive because it's really painful to find out we weren't perfect. And that's most of our stuff comes up around that. Like someone finally got brave enough to say like, hey team, when you say that, it like hurts me this way. And then I can't bear to hear it because I worked so hard in this group, how can you possibly, you know? So just trying to like be like, what does it take to practice both sides of giving and receiving feedback? I think that would like change literally everything. And the story about the forgiveness of my boyfriend, I wanted to include that story in the book because I really feel like almost none of us have experiences of receiving a real apology and actually getting to forgive. Like it doesn't happen with your family, that, you know, they're not into it, or it doesn't happen with most lovers, they just, you know, like a roommate that just ends, you know, jobs. And the experience of like getting to say to somebody, hey, there's this other time you don't remember, and I need to say it to you and know that you hear it, and then actually feeling myself let it go. Like, may everyone have that experience. May we all be able to do what my boyfriend did and be like, I hear you. I can repeat back to you what you said. I'm moved and sad that that happened. And that was enough. And for me to have to be able to then be like, wow, I can let that in and let it go. These are very unusual. We should desire that as much as we desire like a fancy honeymoon or whatever. You know, like this is the shit. It feels amazing. It's like so alive. You know, so that is.
I was thinking so much about this question around justice, and like this is practice. That is a practice of justice. What you just described.
And I have had this with people in the movement. I've had conflicts with people in social movement groups. And you can't do it on your time. I've been in a lot of experiences lately where there's a conflict in a group. You know, like Wu and I are having conflict and we're all in the same mutual aid group, and everybody just wants to see us get better in front of them right now. That's not how it works. Our timeline could be anything. Can we still do we decide we still can do the work in the group together? Good. Or a certain amount of it, or we're not going to be on the same team anymore. We can't ask people to move on our pace. But when and if we're ready to actually be supported, and one of the things that I always want to say this right now, one of the ways you can support people with conflict in your group is confidentiality. Nobody is good at this in our movements. If I come to you after the meeting and I then am so mad at Wu, I can't believe Wu did this and that, just listen to me. Encourage me to say it directly to Wu if you can. You know, if it seems like I'm not going to, encourage me not to like post on the internet about it. And then just listen to me and don't bring it further. Don't go back and tell Wu or tell our other friend, oh, Dean said this about Wu. You know, like that is the stuff that fucks it up. Like that's actually disorganizing us. Confidentiality is huge, you know, and it's one of the things that most of us don't know how to practice. It's like, oh my God, I'm upset. These two people in my group, maybe who I admire, or who were here before me, or whatever, are upset with each other. I'm activated. And then I take a bunch of actions that are not grounded and not actually supportive of those people. This is the kind of thing, you know.
I'm trying to bring us back to this question around practices for you. Has there been a moment where you're like, here's something that I managed to start practicing, or I saw people around my practice that felt like it changed, or it shifted what we can do together, or how we can do together?
Yes, I can think of many examples. I think the like headline for me right now that I just keep coming back to the thought is like one thing that this book felt really revealing for me is like I didn't realize that I'd have this tendency to feel like there is an expert somewhere that's like more think it's like almost like being a small kid where your teacher could like, I have as an adult just felt like, where's the teacher? Like, I just need someone right now with a clear head who just knows what's right.
Yeah.
And the truth is that just isn't, that's just not the world that we're like alive in as like beings. So this book for me gave tools when that feeling comes to, instead of like seek an authority or an expert, to just be like, we have the tools and it's not going to be perfect, it's going to be messy, like, but actually to just practice, literally like rehearse, like, and I love this thing of like giving, like practicing the feedback as it comes, because I do think that that is actually like the key to like finding how to navigate conflict. I'll just give the one example is actually like our actor who played the sheriff. He was actually someone that we had a huge falling out with the first year over his like, okay, well I can say this, but like, because I think he would agree, he was like performing this very toxic white masculinity in a space where there were only like, in an ensemble of like 40 actors, there were only 3 people of color, or 4, and we were all in a little group together, so he was like attacking, and there was a huge falling out of the whole ensemble because of this conflict that lasted multiple years, and somehow in the end, there's like this amazing scene in the play where he and Tosh, who had the conflict, they actually have like, as their characters of Sheriff and Robin Hood, they like actually have this kind of meta reconciliation, so that, I don't know, actually that to me is the thing I'm most proud of about this entire journey of like theater making in Switzerland, is like, we can actually like bridge where there feels like an irreparable difference, and I think the book helped me. I'm just promoting it a lot because I'm like an unofficial distributor. I always like giving copies to
Who you
people.
give it to after you prove to the circles? The teenagers, right? The teenagers. What is the actual time?
It's 2 minutes to 8.
Oh, wow.
So we have about 15 minutes for
Okay.
audience questions.
So we're going to take 15 minutes to audience questions. Everybody just third mic.
I'm conscious of time, so I will say what I often say, which is a question is a single sentence with a question mark at the end. So we can have lots of questions from lots of people, and then you can stick around and chat afterwards or tell your story to Dean in the sign-in queue. We're going to take a few questions at a time. So if you chuck your hands in the air, there we go, there's one in there and one there. I'm going to read the one that's coming online, and then I'll hand it to you so you can go when the answers come in. So one of the first ones online is from Cora, who says, when do you know it's time to break away from the big fields, talking in loops about them endlessly at the cost of dealing with the things we have actually gathered together to fight for?
Do you have any stories or advice to facilitate intergenerational connections within movements?
I'm wondering if we can talk about the act of writing this book as an act of care and mutual aid.
Should we go with those 3?
Yeah. You know, Kelly Hayes, I don't know if you all know her work. She's a brilliant writer. She has a really great podcast called Movement Memos. And I've seen her talk a lot lately about a group she started, I think it's called Understory. And it's like people gather weekly on the weekend, and I think it's a Zoom call. And people really talk about how they're doing and what's really going on. And I think they also kind of talk about things that are sacred to them. And she was like, we need spaces like that because we get together and we're like going to put out the prison newsletter, or we're going to get these meals out this week, and there's not room in the agenda for, like, it doesn't like anyone's asking you how you're doing and actually wants to hear. So one of the questions I have is like, how do even other cultural spaces, like groups that sing, groups that grieve, groups that pray, groups that make art, like, how can we all have more spaces so that, to speak to Cora's question, like, so that we're not trying to do all that, like this is the only thing you do with others. And then there's this agenda. And I've worked with a lot of groups where people are coming out of prison and joining the group, and this is a huge issue. The group has this tight agenda, this person's adapting to life outside of prison after years inside, and there's there's not enough support for them, and then they're trying to get that support out of that meeting, where people are trying to get that newsletter out. You know, so just really thinking about, in general, our isolation, which we were talking about, I think that's a lot of it, and a lot of people I know are doing reading groups with this book. It's because of the topic, it can really help you open up to people. A lot of people have shallow friendships and relationships. There's a lot of evidence about how our online lives reduce the depth of our conversations with others. So what does it take to, like, and a lot of people are like, I can't find anyone I want to go deep with. And I'm like, I think you know them. And also, those are the people. The ones who are around you, that's it. I think the online also can make you feel like there's like some huge audience of like hot brilliant people out there who are involved later fine too. Nope. The ones you know now who are so annoying, those are and so instead it's like, how do we change how we relate? And also maybe, yeah, like be brave and get some new activities and pull some new people in. But if I think no one around me is good enough to open up to, the problem isn't coming from outside. You know, no judgment, of fucking course. It's so hard in this culture, but okay, what steps can I take with others who want to have more space? We're talking about big feelings, and sometimes it's in a larger group, and sometimes it's not really with one other person. And so it just meant intergenerational connection. The most successful place I had that is in like a queer Buddhist meditation group I'm in. Like that's where I've really found that. There's a lot of really radical older people who are very serious about Buddhism, and then there's like very young people. It's actually the most intergenerational space I've ever been in. And I think what works about it is that everyone explicitly talks about how much they like that, and then like asks each other for tea, and like offers to do favors for each other. I think that, and I don't know why that generosity, maybe the Buddhist texts or teachings have helped some people to that. I think people have different levels of relationship to that. Maybe that helps people try. I think a lot of people just really want it from all sides of that. As somebody who's in my 40s, I feel like I'm right in the middle of these people in their 20s, these people in their 60s and 70s and 80s, and I love this. I love my part of the role. I love seeing what it does for others, but I think some of those people have done, like, we're having intergenerational potluck, we're having intergenerational, old people are going to teach young people mahjong, like we've done some of these things. And I think that helps.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's something about having a check of like what your activities are and who's in the room in your activities. For me, like when I first started hanging out in like the trans scene in London in the 2000s, show my age, like we were a super intergenerational community, and then my queer life has always been, the queer community's been super intergenerational until I moved to Edinburgh, and then I was the oldest person. And I was like, oh, this is really weird, why is everyone younger than me? And when I say intergenerational, I mean like, you know, my best friend's like 15 years older than me. I have friends who are in their 70s. And I mean, I learned so much because of that. And there are also things you're like, oh yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't like that in the 80s, but but meanwhile, and then sometimes you're just like, yeah, check out who's in the room with you. It might mean that you just have to say hello to some people you don't know yet. You might make some new friends. It can be surprisingly easy.
I think one of my goals in life with my healing is to become open to more kinds of people in general. Right? I want to become more and more flexible. Not that I don't have boundaries, but that less people like freak me out and I gotta get away. And I think that is related to intergenerational hanging out and other kinds of like cross-cultural and cross-experience hanging out. Is just like, how much can I handle someone being different? They're louder, they're quieter, they don't know these terms that I use, whatever, you know? So I think that's maybe a question to ask ourselves too, just like where am I kind of can't tolerate others? And it's not about like forcing things. I think it's really important to have boundaries in all of our lives, but like, is this part essential, this extra criticism or judgmentalness? The thing I want to say about the writing of this is that I felt so much shame the entire time I was writing it. I had to write like a letter to myself about why I was allowed to try to write this, and like light a candle and read it every time before I sat down to write, because I would just do any other kind of work. Because I just didn't think I was allowed to write this. I just want to say that because I think this is happening to a lot of people we don't have time to get in our own way and not do the things that need to be done. If there's something you think needs to be done, it's okay if other people have done it before. It's okay if you don't say it perfectly. It's okay, like, you know what I mean? A lot of people I know, they're like, oh, well, someone else just came out with that book. And I'm like, it's not the same as the way yours would be. It's just not. Of course, everything has to be said a million times. So I think, like, I just want to say, like, most of us live with an enormous amount of shame. We don't identify it. We actually just believe it. It's story. And I live with so much shame, and it's just so helpful to be like, oh, there's shame talking again. That's a really great coping mechanism for things I went through in very early childhood that we didn't have control over. It's not really helpful now. Who can I ask? Who gives me a reminder speech about, like, woo, about how important my work is to someone who I fully respect and can believe? Where can I go when I get stuck in the story? And I think that is actually an act of care. That's, you know, for myself and others to just get out of the way and take shitty risks. I mean, now it's telling us how much Palestine activism there is in Edinburgh. It's so beautiful. I'm sure many people in this room have been out on a fucking limb. Like, just like, now I'm gonna lose my job. Now these people are saying all these horrible things about me because I'm saying the truth about this. That is so beautiful. It's so worth it.
We have time for some more questions. Is that a hand in the back? No, that was not a hand in the back. Anyone else being shy? I will give you a second to think about it and read out Jean's question, which is, where do you see people who are the problem, i.e. who are responsible for causing harm, most have their aha moment about taking responsibility or making a change? Is there another one? Okay, do you want to roll with that one for now?
Yeah, I have this really juicy question that is related to that for myself. Like, the combination, feedback matters. We have to tell people that they have an impact on us, right? So I don't know if anyone else has had a relationship with somebody who's dealing with addiction. And you're like, I can't change this person, that's actually a really important point. And yet, feedback does matter. It's just not clear when. So it could be that I have to hear this from 20 people. So withholding my feedback from others may be preventing their growth. But also, when I give them the feedback, I can't be like, how dare they not have instantly changed? You know? So how do we hold each other with that level of complexity? I think feedback is like, usually like experiencing the consequences, understanding it. But it could be that 10 people tell me that common one I've experienced in movements where people are like telling someone they're a bad listener. That's like something, you know? And then the person, or that they're too distracted, or they don't follow through. These are very common things that can be hard. But the person didn't really get it the first 10 times they were told, or the first 20. It's not our business when they get it, but we do need to share it, you know? And that's true with intimates. Like, we just are afraid to tell people that they're having an impact, because what if they leave us, or what if they are mad at us, or what if they have a counterpoint? They might. We might also be impacted. You know, like, it's usually complicated. But the beginning point is like, could we in our friendships just say, I want us to give and receive feedback. I know we're all clumsy at it. It's okay. Let's try it with little things, you know? And then also, when I know I'm withholding feedback, it's like, Woo and I are living together, and I'm not telling Woo all these things that she's doing that I don't like, and I'm complaining about Snap. Can my friends say to me, I think you should tell Woo. Yeah, it might not go perfectly, but I think it's worth it. You love each other, you know, whatever.
Is there a final burning question in the room? No. Okay, then I'm going to tell you what happens next. You're all going to stay seated. We are going to applaud. So these people are going to go outside, and Dean's going to be standing at a table in the back. We're selling books on this side. If you are just heading home, you don't want a book signed, or maybe you want to chat with people who are in the room with you, you can head straight out to the cafe and hang about, and you don't feel like you have to rush out. But if you're going to go get a book signed, you want to aim for that door and go around that way. And if you want to buy a book, try and aim that way. So we'll see how well we can manage this. Kind and gentle with each other. Also a reminder is that we have a pay-it-forward system where people who have the money have put money in the pot for you to be able to get a book if you were too broke to get a book. So if you want a book, have a book. Somebody got your back, just come and ask us at the book table. Which brings us to the very important moment of wrapping up today. Thank you very much to Matt, to Woo, to Dean. Will you join me in thanking